There is a quiet, unspoken shadow following you everywhere you go. You might not actively think about it while commuting to work, checking your phone, or having dinner with friends, but it is always there, lurking in the background. It is the subtle, low-grade terror of non-existence, the fear of death. Most people spend their entire lives pretending death does not exist. We distract ourselves with endless work, superficial entertainment, and trivial desires, building fragile castles in the sand to hide from the tide. But whenever illness strikes, whenever we lose a loved one, or whenever we lie awake in the dark at 3 o'clock in the morning, the illusion shatters. The terror returns, gripping our chests and filling us with quiet panic. Why do we live like this? Why do we allow the inevitable conclusion of our story to poison the very chapters we are living right now? Almost 2,000 years ago, the Roman Stoic philosopher Lucius Seneca faced this exact question. In his famous letters to Lucilius, Seneca made an astonishing claim. The fear of death is not a rational response to reality. It is not an unavoidable part of human nature. It is simply a failure of philosophical training. Seneca argued that if you are terrified of dying, it is because you have swallowed fundamental lies about what life and death actually are. Across his letters, he dismantled these lies one by one, crafting 5 unshakable arguments to free the human mind from its greatest prison. If you master these 5 principles, you will not merely comfort yourself, you will render yourself completely invincible to fear. Let us begin with Seneca's first argument. Death cannot hurt you because it cannot coexist with you. In his 4th letter to Lucilius, Seneca confronts the sheer irrationality of fearing something that you will never actually experience as a living burden. He writes, "Death arrives. It would be a thing to dread if it could remain with you, but death must either not come at all, or else must come and pass away." Consider what you are actually afraid of when you think about death. Are you afraid of being dead? But when you are dead, your consciousness has ceased. You will feel no pain, no regret, no darkness, and no sorrow. You will return to the exact same state of non-existence you were in for billions of years before you were born. Were you suffering in the year 1400? Were you miserable during the reign of Julius Caesar? Of course not. The state after life is identical to the state before life. Therefore, death itself is nothing. What you are actually fearing is the ghost of your own imagination. The absurd idea of sitting inside a cold grave wishing you were alive, but you won't be there. As the ancient Epicurean formula goes, which Seneca frequently echoed, where you are, death is not. Where death is, you are not. Death either has not arrived yet, in which case it is not hurting you, or it has arrived, in which case you are no longer there to be hurt. To suffer over something that cannot exist at the same time as your awareness is an error of basic logic. This brings us to Seneca's second argument. We do not die all at once at the end of life. We are dying every single day. Most people view life as a full glass of water that remains untouched until one day it is suddenly smashed on the floor. We think of death as a distant future event that comes out of nowhere to rob us of everything. Seneca exposed this as a dangerous optical illusion. In letter 24, Seneca writes, "We die every day. For every day, a little of our life is taken from us, even when we are growing. our life is on the wane. We lose our childhood, then our youth, and then our young manhood. All our time up to yesterday is gone. Even this very day which we are now spending with death, we share with death. Look closely at your own life right now. The child you were 10 years ago no longer exists. The person you were yesterday has vanished into history. You have already died 1,000 micro-deaths. The hour you spent scrolling aimlessly on your phone this morning, that hour is dead. It is permanently gone, consumed by time. Death is not a monster waiting at the finish line. Death is the clock ticking on your wall right now. It is the breath you just exhaled. When you realize that death is not a future cataclysm, but an ongoing, moment-by-moment process, the dramatic horror of the final breath evaporates. The last hour of your life does not produce death. It merely completes it. Once you understand that death is already happening, you stop waiting in terror for its arrival. Instead, you wake up to the urgent value of the present moment. Seneca's third argument cuts directly to the core of human freedom. Learning how to die is the only way to unlearn slavery. In letter 26, Seneca makes one of the most provocative statements in all of Stoic philosophy. He who has learned to die has unlearned slavery. He is above any external power, or at any rate, he is beyond it. There is only one chain which binds us to life, and that is the love of life. Think about what truly gives external forces power over you. Why do people tolerate toxic bosses, corrupt systems, humiliation, or moral compromise? Why do we bow to tyranny, whether it comes from a dictator or from our own social anxieties? Because we are terrified of losing what we have, and ultimately terrified of losing our lives. The fear of death is the master chain from which every other minor fear hangs. If a tyrant threatens you with exile, poverty, or death, and you fear death above all else, that tyrant owns you. But if you have confronted death, if you have made peace with your own mortality, what leverage does anyone have over you? They can take your possessions, but you know your possessions are temporary. They can take your body, but you know your body is mortal. They cannot touch your moral integrity. They cannot force you to betray your principles. By accepting death, you strip the world of its ultimate weapon against you. You become fundamentally unshakable and truly free. This leads us to Seneca's fourth argument. Death is morally indifferent, and fearing it prevents you from living virtuously. In letter 82, Seneca addresses those who argue that death is an evil to be avoided at all costs. He writes, "The mind will never rise to virtue if it believes that death is an evil, but it will so rise if it holds that death is a matter of indifference." In Stoicism, the only things that are inherently good are virtue, wisdom, courage, and justice. The only things that are inherently evil are vice, ignorance, cowardice, and injustice. Everything else, wealth, health, reputation, and life itself, belongs to the category of indifference. Why? Because a life can be lived wickedly, just as a death can be faced honorably. If death were an inherent evil, then great heroes who sacrificed their lives for truth, justice, or the protection of others would be fools. If saving your life required you to betray your friends or commit atrocities, saving your life would make you evil. When you classify death as an evil, you make self-preservation your highest law. And a person whose highest law is self-preservation will inevitably act cowardly, selfishly, and dishonorably when tested. But when you view death as a neutral natural event, neither good nor bad in itself, you reclaim the ability to act with absolute courage. You choose duty over survival and honor over fear. Finally, we arrive at Seneca's fifth argument. A complete life is measured by its quality and nobility, not its duration. In letter 77, Seneca uses a brilliant theatrical metaphor to illustrate how we should judge the length of our days. He writes, "At whatever point you leave off living, provided you leave off nobly, your life is a whole." As it is with a play, so it is with life. What matters is not how long the acting is, but how good it is. We live in a culture obsessed with quantity. We want more years, more followers, more money, more experiences. We measure a person's life by the number on their tombstone, mourning a life ended at 30 and celebrating one that reached 90, regardless of how those years were spent. Seneca calls this an absurdity, a short play that is tightly written, intensely dramatic, and beautifully executed is infinitely superior to a 5-hour performance filled with boring ramblings and bad acting. A life of 30 years spent with intense purpose, integrity, love, and courage is a complete masterpiece. A life of 90 years spent in passive consumption, cowardice, and distraction is merely a long state of decay. Stop counting your years and start weighing them. You do not control how many chapters your book will have, but you control every single sentence written on the page today. Seneca lived what he preached. When the corrupt Emperor Nero eventually ordered Seneca to commit suicide, Seneca did not weep, beg for mercy, or panic. He calmly turned to his grieving friends, reminded them of their Stoic principles, and met his end with total composure. Every single morning, remind yourself of Seneca's lesson. Death is not your enemy. Your enemy is the unlived life, the wasted hour, and the mind paralyzed by fear. Rehearse your mortality daily. Cling to nothing. Fear nothing. And when your final act arrives, step off the stage, not as a terrified slave, but as a master of your own soul. If this message brought you clarity, subscribe to Stoic Mind. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which of Seneca's 5 arguments hit closest to home. Until next time, stay steadfast.